Welcome back to the Chasing Common Ground podcast. Now, today I have the one and only and friend of the show, Dustin Lebel. And I have to give you kudos because I know that you've listened to episodes. Some people say it. I'm like, I don't think you did. But for you, I have evidence that you have listened to episodes. You've been a supporter of the show. I appreciate you as a person. I am excited about the momentum that you've had with your training business. I kind of am living vicariously through your wins because I like to see my friends win. So, how are you doing today? Tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
I'm awesome, man. Well, thank you for having me. The pleasure is all mine, and very excited to be on. Feel like it's been a kind of like a long time coming, like I was mentioning before we kind of hit record here. I hate to use this term, following each other, but friends on
Yeah,
Instagram for, half a decade or maybe longer at this point. So to finally meet and chat face to face is pretty cool. But yeah, man, I'm all is good. As you've mentioned, you've been kind enough to say you've been following me vicariously through the interwebs, and I've been kind of rebuilding rather my coaching business over the last 6 to 7 months or so, and that's been going very well. After taking a little bit of a hiatus, not a complete hiatus, I've maintained a very, very small client base over the time, but um, got a real job. I'm using air quotes there, but a non-fitness industry related job for the first time ever back in 2020 when my online business was not taking off the way I thought it would. And I had a almost 1 year old at the time, saw the writing on the wall. I needed income. So made a quick pivot and was able to find a job that I'm able to work from home and work remotely. Like technically I'm working right now, playing hooky a little bit to be on this call with you. But yeah, I've had, you know, a lot of ups and downs over the last almost 20 years now of working in the field, and happy to say that we're on the uptrend the last half a year or so. So yeah, things are great, man. Can't complain.
that's good. And I want to make sure that the audience knows that you are a fellow jiu-jitsu practitioner, far more experienced and talented than I, which will make this fun to just chat about because you you started jujitsu quite a while ago, didn't you? Like when did you first start training jujitsu?
This is gonna date myself here. So my first ever jujitsu lesson was in September of 2003. That was my first ever jujitsu lesson. Long story short, so I was just turned 18 at the time. I knew I wanted to do something physical. Mixed martial arts was just starting to take off. The day before, actually, my very first session was the day Randy Couture beat up Tito Ortiz, and that was kind of like a big thing. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna start doing this. And I've always had an interest in martial arts, just growing up watching, Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal movies and this and that. And so that was my very first lesson. And my coach at the time, and still a very good friend, he was a blue belt. So this is back when in 2003, if you were a blue belt, you were a god. If you were a purple belt, you were like a deity, right? So it was like there weren't many black belts around. Chris is now, his my coach's name. He's a third degree black belt, and he's an excellent instructor. But at the time, he was a blue belt, and I was brand new. And that was the first training session I've ever done. And I didn't actually take on the jujitsu that quickly. I actually fell in love with boxing and Muay Thai and more of the striking based arts. Just primarily, I don't know, I had a more of I guess, I was drawn to that a little bit more. And also, I found I could practice on my own. Like you can shadow box and hit the bag, and you can get a lot of extra hours, right, when you're not in front of another person or you weren't going to a class or didn't have someone holding mitts for you, that kind of thing, or sparring partners, what have you. And then I took jujitsu a little bit more seriously back in 2009 or so. I competed a little bit in MMA, not well, uh, lost to submission, and that kind of made me realize I need to start taking jujitsu a little bit seriously. So I was, I earned my blue belt in 2009 or 10. I get the dates kind of mixed up. Uh, tore my meniscus in 2011 or 12, and then I took 10 years off.
Hmm.
So at the time I was coaching a lot on the floor. I needed to be able to like move around, and the risk to reward at that time didn't make sense. I mean, I was working a ton of hours coaching. I was doing the, 6 a.m. to 8, 9 p.m. thing that, everybody who's done this has done. And I just didn't see the space for it at that time. And then, life kind of happened. I always wanted to kind of get back to training, but I found myself working from home, whether it was my remote coaching business or I was working remotely with the job that I have now. Um, you know, Training at home, like do my strength conditioning in my basement, and I was like, I really need to like get out and like see some people, and I want to start, being involved in martial arts again. And so that was December of 2021, like November, December 2021. I started back up again and haven't looked back since. And I've just been trying to be super consistent since then. Uh, train, I'm a hobbyist. I train 2 to 3 days a week. I can count on one hand the number of times I've trained more than 3 days a week, and I can probably count on one hand the amount of times I've trained less than 2 days a week, like over the
Yeah.
last 3 years. So it's very consistent, and it's allowed me to really uh, re-embark on that journey, really enjoy the process, and I don't take it for granted at all. Like I, you know, truly love um, kind of going through the ups and downs of the jujitsu journey, and it's been incredibly rewarding since I started back up. So yeah, that's where I'm at
Yeah.
now with that.
And then as you got back into it, you had a promotion after you started, right? Like at least one
So when I
with your
started,
jujitsu?
funny story. When I started, I tried to go into my first class back wearing a white belt. And my friend, who I started training with many, back in that 2003, 2004 time frame, he owns a very big gym here in Connecticut called Underdog MMA. So I go into Underdog, my first session, and I'm wearing a white belt. And he looks at me, he's like, that's not how this goes. He's like, you need to put on your blue belt and kind of re-earn your stripes. So my instructor at the time, Moreno, Diogo Orujo, he was like, shaking his head. So he gets a blue belt out for me, ties it up for me, and that's how I started back up. So that was, when I first started, and I spent 2 years training, and I was a very close training partner with Moreno, just due to some scheduling conflicts, like working from home and stuff. I didn't really have, and having a kid and another one on the way, I didn't really have time to go to like classes. So he had these like call them competition training, classes, and they would be like midday. So I started training with him and that group of guys uh, for 2 years consecutively, 3 days a week, and then I was promoted to purple belt last December of 2023 now. So I've been a purple belt for a little over a year.
That's incredible. Like most people that are tuning in that have never done jujitsu won't ever understand the significance of like having that gap between when you did jujitsu and then when you came back to jujitsu, and then B, what an emotional experience it is to get any promotion. Like even like when
Yeah,
you're getting a stripe, like
yeah,
we play it off like it's kind of like, oh yeah, well, I thought it would happen eventually, but like it reaffirms so much of our purpose, our mission, our identity. It helps us understand that we are improving, even if it doesn't feel like we're improving. And something that I really like about this conversation is I've met so many people at white belt, and I met so many blue belts who I never saw again. And I'm like, what would it take to get some people to come back to the mats? Like we make all these jokes about the burnout rate of blue belts, or like how
mm,
few white belts make it to blue belt, all these other things. Like it is kind of funny the volume of people that reach their blue belt and then you never see them again. Um, and it's tricky because like if you only I sometimes I train once a week. I like to try and aim for 3 times, but if I train once a week, it would be easy for any of my teammates to assume that I left because like what are the odds that they're going to be there on the same
At
day
the
as
same,
I
yeah,
am?
yeah,
And so it's just like my thought process is in life, so many people quit when they didn't need to. Like their success was inevitable if they just had the grit and resilience to keep going, and if they just understood that you don't have to be perfect. Like oftentimes I'll think about um other people who train more than me, and I'll be like, oh, I'm not training as much as they are. And so I must not be, my training must not be enough. But then I'm realizing like there's a lot of factors that go into life. And the fact that I'm training at all is better than not training at all.
yeah,
And just so many little things that go into that. So when you were leading up to you're gonna start doing jujitsu again, you're gonna start finding your community. I definitely understand that isolation aspect because I too do a lot of remote work. And like the biggest immediate benefit from jujitsu was I got to have some new friends. And I got to
yeah,
have some new
yeah,
people I could connect with, like some like real life humans that like just being in close proximity to actual people makes a huge difference, even if they're trying to kill you. It's nice when they're trying to kill you. They're nearby. Like
yeah.
it's weird to
It's
say,
comforting.
but yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the thought process, the emotions leading up to like you're like, okay, you took all this time off. It's been such a long time and you're gonna get back into it and it's gonna kind of feel new again.
Yeah, I think I had just had the realization that jujitsu is deeply personal in the way you approach it, right? In terms, like you just mentioned, you might train once or twice a week. Sometimes you get in 3 days a week, but that's you on your personal journey. And so what I needed to realize is that I'm just not capable of training 4, 5, 6 days a week, doing 2 days, that kind of thing. And that's okay. My progression might be slower, but it's ultimately going to be longer, right? And as you mentioned, so many people, the candle burns out pretty quickly. As I've seen very few people who started training back when I first started are actually still doing the thing. For all the reasons that we can think of. Life happens, life gets in the way, but I think ultimately we get in our head that we need to be progressing faster or be in a different place than where we actually are. And so, some people might look at how we train a couple days a week and be like, it's not even worth it. Why would you even train 2 to 3 days a week? And that's probably the thought process that ultimately led me to stop. If you had told me you could train once a week or whenever you can and still slowly progress, yeah, you're gonna take your lickings for a while just because that progression is going to ultimately be slower, but you will still be able to get all the benefits of training of doing jujitsu, the social, the physical, the psychological, even the spiritual, if that's your thing. Like there's so many benefits that go into training, and I'm just reminded of that every single day that I get to train. And so when I was thinking about starting back up again, I just told myself, you know what, we're just going to commit to 2 days a week, and I'm just gonna try to go the whole year not missing a week of doing 2 days a week. And I did actually. That was like one thing that I kind of like put my fist on. I was like, all right, I'm gonna do this. I'm not gonna miss a single week. And I did. And I think forgot what happened where I ultimately had to miss a session or something. But it's life happens. But I've just been really steadfast on being as consistent as possible, and it's paid off. And yes, you're not going to be a world beater training a couple days a week, for 45 or 60 or 75 minutes a session. But I feel like the progress I'm making is good for me. I really enjoy training. Every time I get on the mats, I'm like happy to be there. I'm
Hmm.
never dragging myself to the gym. I'm never like too beat up or too injured. I mean, a little bit, but it's not, I'm never too beat up or too injured to, you know, want to get after it that particular day. So just a little shift in mindset, which I probably didn't have in my late 20s, maybe early 30s, but I do now, whether that's forced through circumstance or just maturity, whatever the case is. But I'm happy I did it.
Yeah, I mean, that's so many good reflections and some of the things that have been top of mind for me just from my own experiences. Like, I'll train jujitsu and I'm like, okay, let's up the frequency. And so I'll up the frequency and then all of a sudden I hit my breaking point. Like sometimes I can't train frequently because I can't move my head. Like I'm like
Yeah,
I can't function, or like maybe my jaw got impacted in a submission or something. Sometimes it's been my knee, sometimes it's been I've had a lot of issues with like oblique muscles lately. And so there's been lots of little like intricacies and like road bumps. And through that, I've realized that in having a jujitsu practice, it actually grounds you in so many other aspects of life. Because when we are getting more and more consumed by like our training business, and we're trying to like essentially hit PRs with that. Like, let's say we set targets for ourselves. We're like, okay, feels pretty good having X a number of clients or people that we work with.
right.
Let's increase that by a bit. That also requires a lot of inputs, just the same as it would for jujitsu, just the same as it would for increasing your training volume on the training floor. And what I have learned is by having my foot in the door with jujitsu, it keeps me more honest and more structured with my strength training because it absolutely like highlights the weak areas. Like I've been doing all those push-ups and I joke
Yeah,
that I started doing the push-ups more for me than for anybody else because push-ups are one of those exercises that you could, if I go traveling to the mountains, I can do some push-ups. If I
yep.
have like a long, busy day and I'm like, I'm not wearing the right outfit or something, I could still do push-ups. Like I could be just getting ready for bed, do the push-ups, hop into bed. I can roll out of bed, do the push-ups, start my day. On average, takes like 35 to 40 seconds to crank out a set of 20.
Yeah.
And the full body benefits are like it's unbelievable how much it helps with like shoulder health and like core strength and stuff. Like most people are like, ah, you're doing push-ups, you're just gonna like strong arms, strong chest. No, like it's so much more. And that's helped me because it just gives me one little tiny baby step um to add on to my own routine because sometimes I'll do my own workouts at like the kind of powerlifting Olympic weightlifting gym that I train clients at.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'll do my workouts at the Judgment Free Zone at Planet Fitness. And it's
Shout out
just,
Kyle Dobbs. He,
he
he's gonna.
influenced a lot of us to pop into Planet Fitness.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's hard to hold ourselves to these high standards that everything has to be perfect.
Hmm.
But in doing that, what I've really liked is your approach to offering training. And I like if you were able to be everybody's go-to for like jujitsu style strength training, like where they kind of complement each other. I think that would be perfect because you do such a good job of it. And you're able to kind of like adapt to everybody's chaotic lifestyle because you've lived it. And you're able to program more effectively than the average person. Like what I often see is it's kind of like this template of trainer starts jujitsu, gets two stripes on their white belt. Now they sell strength training programs for jujitsu practitioners. I'm like, no. Like I'm not, for me, I do train some people who do jujitsu, but they're mostly coming to me because we built a rapport and I'm fun to work with. It's not necessarily because
Of course.
I'm going to be the very best person to help with their jujitsu. It's just I'm probably for that specific individual going to keep them accountable. They're going to answer my messages. They're going to see me on the mats. And for that reason, they're going to stay on their program. But what I see in you, and I've done my research with your career because I've set you up on Beverly's podcast and done a lot of
Yeah.
stuff, like you have more breadth of experience and there's more things that you're going to be able to apply to a person's program based on skill set, based on like when we have all these character building moments and stuff, it gives us a level that other people don't have. And it's a level that can't be replicated with AI. And I'm a big fan of AI, but there's certain like human elements that
Hmm.
like you could even work with AI to come up with solutions and be able to discern which solution is the best for that individual. And so, with that said, I'd be curious to dive more into maybe like some case studies of people that you've worked with that are jujitsu practitioners, where your training, how your training helped them, or just like maybe how they started working with you and what's happened since.
Yeah, so I'm just going to take a quick step back because I just want to address something that you brought up is the fact that jujitsu helps make you more adaptable, right? You have to problem solve and come up with solutions as those problems arise, pretty quickly. As a quick side note, side tangent here, I'll never forget. I was like 3, 4 months back into training again, and I'm talking to my coach Moreno at the time, and I asked, after class, "Hey, is there anything you think I could work on? Is there anything I could prove?" And he goes, in his way of saying it, he goes, "I feel like you're being too rough." And when he said that, I was like, I tell the story all the time. I was mortified because I'm like, wait, am I the spaz? Like I kind of had that like quick reflection of like, what am I doing to where I think I'm doing the right things, but then someone else is seeing from the outside and who rolls with me on a very consistent basis, regular basis, and he's saying that I'm being too rough. So from that moment, when that happened, I really took to understanding pace and how to develop a game that was built more towards longevity. And then as time kind of went on, I actually suffered an injury last November where I tore my labrum back in 2003. That's one of the reasons why I didn't take on a jujitsu that quickly. So I started training, tore my labrum, had surgery. Pretty sure I retore it again last November. I haven't got an MRI, but it's just been bothersome since. Doesn't stop me in everyday life situations, but I just have to be very cautious when I'm rolling. So I've had to adapt my entire game around this injury. I have to play a conservative game. I have to play a slower game. I have to pick and choose my battle. So that's one way. And then obviously you have to adjust your strength conditioning around that as well. Now, in terms of, working with folks in strength conditioning, I think a lot of people, as a general concept, a lot of people come to me with either kind of like they've done a hodgepodge of different training programs over the years. Either they are, they treated strength and conditioning like their sport. I think we know what that means. Like me, they love lifting, they love doing all the things, they follow all the same people on social media, and now they're adding jujitsu into that mix. And so for that individual, it's oftentimes taking a look at what they're doing, paring things back, and finding out what's actually necessary for them at this point in time. Whether that's through conversation or just kind of this ongoing assessment process where you're evaluating them based on their training results and kind of how they're feeling. And then you have people who have kind of, they do jujitsu, they know they should strength train, they've dabbled, they've done this and that, they've tried different things, and they just need structure. They need a plan. They need something that's going to allow them to progress over a long period of time and also fit in with the amount of the amount of training that they're doing on the mats. So whether they're a hobbyist training 2 to 3 days a week or uh, competitor. So my previous coach, he moved to Dallas, so that's why I no longer work with him. But Moreno is also a client of mine, and I handle all of his strength and conditioning. He tore his ACL this last spring. So he's fresh off of, well, he had surgery and he's fresh off of his recovery. So we're now process of rebuilding him back up to where he can compete again at the highest level. So this is a guy he won the 2012 medium heavy IBJJF worlds. He's won Masters worlds. He's 40 now or going to be 41. So, but he still wants to compete as an adult, and Masters. So getting him back to the point where he's confident in being able to push himself in training and step on the mats again for competition is just something that we're constantly working on. So for him, again, he's a workhorse. So it's a matter of oftentimes pulling back communication in terms of what's feeling good, what's not feeling good, how can we progress, how's your training going on the mats, not just with me, that kind of thing. So it is just this constant kind of back and forth, and whether it's with him or any of the clients that I work with that train jujitsu, in determining like what are next steps. What's like the next best thing we can do to get you on track and feeling your best on the mats ultimately.
There's something that you said that I heard that maybe the audience won't have heard just because they don't pay attention to the same things. What I picked out was when you address that sometimes some of the changes that you're making are what to dial back on. And I think
Mm,
that's super, super important because in today's world, like I I get to be on so many different conversations and calls with people throughout the week. I found myself to be quite the networker because I'm in an investing group. I am on my condo board, regretfully. I am also involved in like helping other coaches. I'm involved in helping Gen Pop. I'm still doing general population training on the training floor. And I've learned that so many people in today's world are feeling like they're maybe not doing enough, they're not enough, so they just keep collecting more things, keep collecting more things. And they're not necessarily like looking at it objectively as to like where are you at in your life with all these things in reference to where you want to be. They're just like, if I collect more things, I'll just be further along. But they're not like, have you progressed in the way that you want
yeah.
to? And so your ability, and that's basically what I'm paying tribute to with your like experience in life and in the industry, is you have a better filter to kind of see. And part of that is because the amount of resilience and grit that you've had to accumulate, like going through all these phases where it's like things aren't working the way that you wanted them to work. What do you have to do now? You go, you do it, you figure it out. It's not glamorous, but you figured it out and you stay the
Mhm.
course. So with that said, what has been one of the most profound moments where either you've dialed something back and got better outcomes, or somebody you've worked with has dialed something back and got a better outcome?
Great question. Um, Starting with myself, and now maybe this will maybe pivot the conversation slightly. I mentioned way at the beginning of this call how around 6 or 7 months ago, back in June, I started this process of rebuilding my coaching business. So what I needed to do at that time was, I had one, I think I've kind of fluctuated between like 2 and 5 clients over the last couple of years, just sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, but I've always kind of maintained. I've had one who's just been with me for 8 years and she's the best. And shout out Addie if you listen to this. Um, but other than that, I've always on purpose last 4 years maintained a very small client load. I don't know if I was burnt out from coaching, but I'm making a good income from the other job that I have. And I just didn't see myself having the time to commit to doing this again. But I kind of came to this realization that, you only get one shot at this, and then this is your life. Now is the opportunity to do what you want, what you intended to do, what you set out to do, what you said you were going to do back when you were like 13. Like now is the time to recommit to this process. So what did I had to take away just kind of um, I don't know, a little bit of my ego in terms of like how I structured pricing and just how I was presenting myself and putting myself out there and how to get those first few clients back in the door. I had to put a lot aside and just kind of bite down on my mouthpiece and go for it. I don't know if that's quite what you're asking, but that's just what comes to mind first and foremost. That's like front of mind for me um, in regards to just making a very profound change where it's not, not life-changing income. I won't pretend it's that, but to go, uh, I've added 20 some odd clients over the last 6 months, which was the busiest I've ever been, or I've been since I started working online. You know what I mean? So it's a 4 year gap really of having done that. And so it's really been very rewarding and also demonstrates that I can do this and that
Mm-hmm.
I can build the business that I want and ultimately be able to get back to doing that full time. In terms of working with others, I mean, trying to think. I'd say, I mean, the majority of the clients that I work with, they tend to come to me because for probably a lot of the reasons that you've alluded to. Like, I don't have a flashy Instagram. I don't have a ton of followers. Uh, I'm not some elite level competitor or anything like that. I just try to put out information that um, hopefully connects with what people are seeking, try to come across as a real human being. So because of that, a lot of people come to me and they're like, "Yeah, I've been following you for like 8 years, and I figured now is a good time to hop on board." So like my clients are cool, like for lack of a better term, like they tend to come to me knowing that like kind of like what my jam is and how I'm gonna kind of redirect them. But I'm trying to probably like the last 10 or so clients that I kind of have in mind that do jujitsu are have all kind of gone through that process of like starting off thinking it was going to be one thing that I was just going to hammer them constantly all the time, and then kind of realizing that there's going to be this ebb and flow to training, and sometimes I actually wrote a little post about this yesterday, but sometimes we're going to push, sometimes we're going to pull back, and one thing that I really try to do a good job on now is just keeping my like finger on the pulse with everybody and just kind of reading through the lines and understanding like, okay, this person's starting to, I could just tell by the way they're reporting their information, we need to pull back, or they need a nudge, they need a call for me or a text for me, or whatever the case might be. So I hate to say I don't have one like that stands out, but I think I think of multiple situations this week where I had to reach out to different clients because I could just tell just based on uh, how they were giving me feedback, like it was time for it, need to make an adjustment. Reached out to both. We were able to problem solve, come up with next best steps, and kind of get them back on track. Because as we know, training, because we take it so personally and so seriously, a lot of us, that it's easy to kind of get in our own heads. And my job is to just get you out of your head and
Yeah.
to let you know that I got you. But it's going to take work on both ends, and we just have to collaborate and think like what are the next best steps to get us in the direction we need to be going in.
I like that. And what I resonated with the most is where you're talking about how you're watching kind of like the inputs of your respective clients and you're acknowledging moments where it's like, okay, in this moment, we should adapt, change it, swap some things out. Like that's it. A lot of people will say that they do it, but in the actual practice of coaching, they don't necessarily do it because they just might be like they haven't had enough experience to understand the intricacies of interpersonal stuff. Where it's like, no, this is like a sign that you need to offer a different kind of support. It's not that
Mhm.
they aren't like, they're not being stubborn. It's not a lack of discipline. They need better collaboration. Because what I'll see is like, somebody will start something, they'll start their business, and they'll have all this stuff set up and it's like, yeah, you can't miss a session because you got these reminders in your phone and everything should be perfect because I built everything for you and it's foolproof and like you're just going to be successful. And then they're like, yeah, my client ghosted me. I'm like, okay. And it's like they're not painting the full picture. And like we've all experienced somebody like maybe not answering a message or maybe not putting in all the inputs. But then it's like, how often do we look at it from the other person's perspective? Like, I have some online clients where it's like, they weren't tracking their nutrition. Like, some of my people will keep like a log of what they're doing for their nutrition because that's kind of like
Mhm.
the bigger rock that they need to focus on. And as I've gotten older, I've realized like it's is less about them not willing to do the thing and more about them not understanding how to do the thing. Like
Mhm.
even just like the onboarding process of helping a person out makes a huge difference in their ability to get the outcomes. And in other cases, it like there's such thing as a cultural gap. Like I worked with or work with lots of people who are of South Asian descent. And for me to just be like, yep, here's your nutrition protocol, that doesn't work. Like you have
No.
to like reinvent the wheel. You almost have to collaborate with other people who can relate to them more because the old tricks don't work anymore. And you can't expect them to work because what is the rationale that, like, them completely changing absolutely everything about their identity just to fit into your program? Like, how does that work? Like, they came for a performance result. They didn't come to completely stop celebrating every cultural and social event in their life. And so
Right,
it's
right.
just these little details, they add up so much. And often when it comes to the success rate of a client or the retention of a client or the renewal of the client or like the what they perceive the value that they're getting in their experience, like all that is not like the flashy this, the flashy that, like when we talk about like social media presence or like having 8K video in your posts, is not that. It is just like the actual experience that they have in the program. And so where I get like when I see you getting momentum, I'm like, it's exciting because it's sustainable. Because it's not like you're the only person in the industry I'm connected to where I'll see like their momentum. It's that I've seen enough people with their momentum where I can like be a lot more intuitive as to like, oh no, this is a model that works. Like his people are going to get the results that they paid for, and he's going to have a very strong retention rate and a really good referral rate. And the fact that you are okay with imperfection is going to be like an advantage. And I say that in like that you are willing to do what it takes to modify your program if you ever need to, and you're not going to let your ego get in the way, which is oftentimes why a lot of people leave the industry because their thing people quit because they think that it was supposed to work perfectly the first time. Like I don't know anybody where it worked perfectly the first time. Like if if we listen to the podcast that like Kyle Dobbs has been on, shout out Kyle Dobbs, I haven't done that in a while, feels good. If we listen to his podcast appearances, he often generously shares a lot of the times when he has had to learn or adapt, or the times when he's taken on further study to enhance some areas that he wanted to get better at, whether it be his, I think he did his master's in psychology,
Mhm.
and he has done more continuing education courses than I could possibly ever list off on this show, enough to be an impressive amount. And it's just like no matter who we use as our example, like even the wild stories that Dr. Pat Davidson has, man, that guy has stories. And
Yeah.
it's just like obviously the stories come with lessons. If he got it perfect the very first time, there'd be no stories. And so it's just we really need to embrace being able to collect stories and not be so hung up on like it didn't work the first time. And it's not to discourage like new people from like getting their feet wet and getting into the industry and stuff, is to prepare them to put more material out there where it's like, look, better be ready to get your ass kicked because that's life. Like, even if you weren't in the fitness industry, like, I pick on the real estate industry a lot because it's just such a stereotype of trainer doesn't do training well, goes and
It
goes into
goes in the
real
risk.
estate. But I love realtors, so shout out to them just because they are, if they are convicted in that they will have success no matter what, they're willing to adapt and do a lot of very innovative things in order to make what they want to happen. But the thing is that again, there's lots of times where they'll get their license, they'll get started, and then they won't get the results that they want, and they feel defeated, and then they think that the problem is something other than what the problem may be, and it may be that like they didn't get a good enough like scope of what their person was really looking for. And so maybe the contract that the person signed with them wasn't fulfilled. Like they didn't find the dream home, or they didn't get a good enough scope of What was unique about the listing? Like maybe they didn't there's a lot of people who will take the effort to do the market research that's needed for the ideal person to live there. And then there's some people who will just be like, yeah, this place is at this location and it's a house. And if you like this location, you can live here. But some people will be like, okay, this location is specific to these industries. It's walkable to these places. And I don't know anybody off the cuff that likes this stuff. So I'm going to source out those people and do targeted Facebook ads to those specific people. Maybe people relocating to go to a specific company, little things like that. And like that's where people can like move further along in life than where they would otherwise. But if they were stuck on like their first iteration was supposed to be the supreme iteration that works, that's where they fall. But one of the things that I was curious about because of the momentum that you've had and you've recently done that price increase, which I think is important because you got to eat. What are your long-term goals for yourself with your training business?
Yeah. So just to touch on one thing real quickly that you mentioned as well, you mentioned the fact that everybody has a unique story. And I think if you're selling yourself or a product that you rely on you being the product, I think one thing that, especially if you're not, look, I'm not, again, I'm an elite level jujitsu competitor. I'm not crazy fit or crazy strong. I'm like relatably fit and relatably strong. Like you got to have I think a good story. I think people buy your story more than anything else. I think someone that, I maybe not look up to on a personal level, but just from his work was, Anthony Bourdain. And you think about Anthony Bourdain's career and what allowed him to basically become the name that we know and recognize is he wrote an amazing story. Like I have Kitchen Confidential right here. It's like right by my desk. So it's a constant reminder that you need to write your own story and it's got to be personal to you. Anthony Bourdain, I mean, he was, a classically trained chef, but he was known by his friends as just not being very good, but he was an amazing storyteller. So anyway, that's my thought on that and just kind of something how that's allowed me to, I think, pivot and grow a little bit. In terms of where I want to take my business, yes, I had a small price increase at the last or earlier this week to mark the beginning of the year. And so just kind of going backwards on that too. So one thing that I did early on was like taking a page from Mike Dola and hearing his story with Stronger You. One thing that Mike always talks about in every podcast I've ever listened to him on is he talks about how when he was starting out, he was going to do it better for cheaper. And I know it's like a faux pas in the fitness industry. Like you have to be, you have to charge what you're worth and you have to, high ticket this and high ticket that. So I went in the opposite direction. I was like, I have an income coming in. I don't need the money per se. Why don't I just charge what I think people are willing to pay and see what happens? So I started with this like weekly payment model where people would pay weekly instead of monthly. And it was a very low price point, $25 a week, to on a week on literally on a pay on a weekly basis for individualized programming, and that is what got people in the door. So I had a bunch of people come out of the woodwork and they're like, yeah, I'm interested. And whether they thought and I've tried various price points in the past and, people will pay what they think you're worth ultimately. And whether that's for better or worse, I think you need something to get your foot in the door and build momentum. So that's where I started. And I continued with that over the last 6 months. And I just recently raised my rates just a smidge to a monthly rate that's a little bit more along the lines of like, if I were to think of like dollar per hour of what I would commit to each client. And then I'll adjust probably at each quarter and then, kind of go from there. But my ultimate goal, not ultimate goal, but where I want to be, let's say in a year from now, is be at the point where I am comfortable leaving my sales position and going full time working remotely. I don't want to look outside of that just yet because I don't see the need. I want to get to the point where I can replace my income or one and a half basically my current income before I'm able to make that leap. Um, I'm fortunate. I'm My wife is an accountant, she's a CPA, and there's two things in life that are certain, death and taxes. So she'll have a job, a very stable job forever. So I have a little bit of wiggle room to kind of be the adventurous one and go after my dreams. But we have two kids, we have a mortgage and all that, so I can't take too much risk. But that's where I want to be, and to get to that point, um, I will need to continue to probably raise my rates and increase, um, not necessarily the level of service. I know that concept, but almost like the perception of the level of service, because I think what I provide now, just from what I heard of what other keep coaches provide, charging way more, it's more than that. Like in terms of just the personal touch. Um, if somebody respond, like, and this is another Mike Dola thing, if you message me almost at any time, I'm gonna get back to you within minutes. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Or I tell people, I just kind of manage expectations. I say within 24 hours, but it's always within like an hour or less. If
Mm-hmm.
unless it's like 7 in the morning, we're getting the kids ready for the bus and for daycare and stuff, or it's 5 o'clock at night and it's like witching hour in my house, I'm gonna get back to you very quickly. So my response rate is impeccable. If you need me, I'm here for you. I will get on a phone call. I will get on a video call. I will do whatever it takes. And that's a little bit of the above and beyond. So I want to just increase maybe the perception and the value that I provide so that I can increase my rates, which I think just comes from more people working with me, posting results. Like I get a lot of people that share their results on social media, and they, or whether that's through a text message or a message on the app that I use. So I think continuing to do that will help. But yeah, outside of that, I don't have a grand goal. I want to get to the point where I'm coaching full time, and that's all the only thing I focus on. And I'm happy. I'm in a good place where I can coach people, train jujitsu, train myself, and be able to live my life with my family. Like that's the immediate, 1 year to 18 month, 24-month goal if I had to list that out. And then beyond that,
Love it.
we'll see. Life happens fast, so you never know.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to take away from that, and even some just like tangible lessons for people to learn from as well. Like I have a lot of people that well, first and foremost, I don't want to forget, shout out Mike Dola because I love Mike Dola. So you talked about him, give him a shout out.
Yeah.
Now back to the topic at hand. When it comes to goals, I've had conversations with probably like no exaggeration, at least 300 different people over the course of maybe 4 to 6 years, both on podcasts, not on podcasts. And this is like, I have names for these people. I'm not rounding up or anything.
Right.
And these conversations each have been like at least an hour long. And some of them have been semi-regular, like maybe reoccurring conversations. And in
Mhm.
that process, like I'll ask people and be like, "Do you have goals?" And some people will scoff at it. They're like, "No, I don't think that far ahead." And some people will be like, "Yes, I have goals." Now, I've known a lot of these people for enough years to see what happens when they have goals versus when they don't. And it can feel cliche to have goals, but if you don't have them, you can't get them. And so for you to kind of have that as a pinpoint for your future almost guarantees that it's at least going to come close to happening, but more likely it will happen and you'll probably exceed the result. And then like the next thing which I love doing is just being able to actually like make it into reality. Like especially if
Mhm.
you have an accountant in the house, that makes a big difference. So just
Oh
like
yeah.
from the standpoint of like being able to address, and I like to address it like if you're gonna set a goal, you want to set a goal that like doesn't feel like a prison when you've achieved it. So if I set like a revenue goal for my business, the revenue goal also accounts for like a $4,000 trip to Europe, $8,000 in conference travel, 4 weeks off work if I get a debilitating illness, and maybe a budget for snacks. Like you want to
I
factor in
love that.
everything
Yeah.
that you would actually feel happy with, knowing
Yeah.
that like money isn't some morale based thing. It's just kind of like what we need in order to have the life that we want.
Yep.
If we treat money as like a morale based thing or like a ethics based thing or just like something that has more weight to it than it really does because it's just like a piece of paper, it's just a coin, it's just a number,
Right.
then we end up limiting ourselves. But from the standpoint of acknowledging the fact that in order to get certain goods and services, we need to have some of this money, then we go into situations where it's like, okay, if I need to have this money in order to get these experiences, then I need to plan for that. And so it's like you come up with this big revenue target, accounting for things like the taxes, the expenses, the insurance, all that stuff. And then it's like, okay, how can we reverse engineer it? And like a lot of this is influenced by my work inside Beverly's business. But it's
Hmm.
just it's changed me as a person to be able to see things in so many different ways because it's not so much about like, oh yeah, we're just gonna take your mediocre thing and we're gonna tell you to double it and then you're done. That's not it.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
more about being able to find the way to hit that revenue target in the way that suits you best. And so for your stuff, if you're like, okay, I want to work with this many people, and I want to hit this revenue target, and I want to give them this experience, then that's the exciting part because with everything that you know how to retain people, you know how to get them what they're paying for, you know how to make them feel seen and heard. And then it's just like, what don't you know? And then the what
Right.
don't you know is like, there's been times where somebody could just switch their training platform and it cuts down the time that it takes to program the individual. There's times when it's like you switch up how you're communicating with people and they still get that like having a coach in their pocket feeling. But then you're able to kind of like filter out responses, or I'll give you one really easy to implement example. There's lots of times where I'll have people will ask me like a really tough question and I'll be like, I have to think about this one. And then when it comes
Hmm.
down to it, it takes me like 45 minutes to answer their really tough question. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll take that question and I'll go into ChatGPT and I'll be like,
Yeah.
based off of the concepts in motivational interviewing, what would be the best unbiased approach to answer this question in the most concise way? And it'll give me an example of an answer. I'm like, ooh, I like that. And I won't copy paste it, but I'll be like,
Right.
I never thought about answering it in that way. And then it takes that response from 45 minutes to like 4 minutes, but it's actually a better response than I would have had inherently. And that's just like one of many examples because like you could have it where all of the communication from your people runs through in like an internal system where you start to have these filters where it's like they're asking this kind of question, you want to elicit this kind of response, you look at it, approve, boom, done. From their end, they're getting the most like personalized, high level response they've ever had from a coach. And like at a faster pace than you've ever been able to deliver. And so that's the exciting thing about like being in the weeds of building these things because then the
Mm.
more that you can kind of look at all this stuff, the more it can happen. And then once you kind of get open to that mindset, then it's like in like 1 year, you'll totally hit that goal. And that's just like, this is more about just the way my brain works. I'm always like, okay, what's the next step? What's that next level, next level? And I'm also aware of like the things that I'm terrible at. Like, there's lots of stuff that I'm terrible at. And so I'll be like, okay, how can I work on this skill? Over the last probably 4 years, I've worked on my conciseness because sometimes I can be so passionate and so wordy that people will, it's like they're window shopping, like, nope, too wordy, gone. And total missed opportunity, whether it be a professional opportunity, personal opportunity. I'm like, I could totally have the same vision but have a way to make that vision more relatable to more people without
Mm.
changing anything about my personality, without diluting any passion that I have for things. And I can totally move the needle forward in that way. But with that said, um, I have to say this has been a very good conversation that we've had, and I want to give you a space to perhaps leave our audience with like some advice or like tangible tips as to like they've listened to us for an hour. what would you recommend that they do after they finish this episode?
Well, first of all, thank you for the conversation. It was awesome. You're a fantastic interviewer, so this was great. Put me at ease. In terms of suggestions for folks, number one, start training jujitsu. What are you waiting for? You'll meet an awesome community. You'll have this physical outlet, uh, a hobby that you can pursue and make personal for you for the rest of your life, if you so choose. We're slightly biased, but I'm half joking there. In terms of maybe fellow coaches who are listening to this and they're trying to build an online coaching business from scratch and don't know where to start. I'm not an expert by any means. I'm barely scratching the surface here, but I feel like the little bit I've done over the last 6 months or so has really helped me break through. And I would just say to, check your ego at the door in terms of what you think you're worth. Um, Let people know your story. You know, pe How do I say this without people probably don't they need to hear it, but they don't need to hear how many steps they need to take and how much protein they need to eat and the fact they need to lift heavy 3 days a week. They do need to hear that, but everybody's saying the same things. What's what's different about you as a person and your unique, like what do you bring to the table? I think that will help, because I think people are stuck in the loophole of putting out the same information as everybody else without making it personal to them. Especially if you're trying to stand out and you don't have the, you know, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers. I have a relatively small following, but I don't feel like I need a big following actually to build what I need to build now. And I think that's help. Be relatable, be a human being, get the ball rolling and don't stop. I think would be my advice. And then also if you're going to do the job, just do it well. Be
Mhm.
be personal, build connections with folks. A lot of people might hire you initially for a program, and I always say that people don't need a coach until they need a coach. They'll do the program. Some people, especially if you work like I have, I'd say over half of my clients are fellow coaches. Just kind of the what I've fallen into. Um, but so they'll be robots for a while until they need a coach, and then everybody needs a coach at some point. So that would be my next thing. And in terms of I think just do what makes you happy in life. Don't be selfish about it if you have a family and people you need to provide for. But you get one go at this. So I think take some time to reflect on what you want uh, personally for your family and for those around you, and try to build those connections and build a life that's worth living because it's a short go, and we want to make the most of it.
True that. So I will end the recording, but I'm going to get you to stay on the line. But before I end the recording, just thank you so much for making time for the show and for being on for this conversation.
No, man, thank you for having me. It's been an honor, and yeah, happy to do it.